Well, here to talk about the issue of culture and trust is Paul Hucknall, who is the chair of City HR and People Director Centres of Excellence at Lloyds Banking Group. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Why is culture and trust an important topic for companies and their HR departments?
Well, put simply, it's the bond between the businesses and the customers that they serve, essentially built on trust, and that has ever been the case. It's perhaps more the case now than ever, particularly for financial services firms that we represent, largely because of the financial crisis and what has happened over the last 10 years. Companies are in the position that they need to rebuild that trust with their customers.
There's a term which is called organisational culture. What does that mean?
Quite simply, I think it means the way that colleagues in an organisation behave. Often organisations like my own will put in place a statement of those behaviours, the expectation of their staff. And it's the way that you're expected to behave with customers, with other colleagues, with other external stakeholders. And it's that description of your culture that is the organisation's lifeblood. What can organisations do to change or embed a particular culture within an organisation? I think there are really three steps to doing that, actually. The first one is to be very clear about the type of culture that you want and to really define that. And that has to be owned and led by the very top of the organisation. So the most senior leaders in the organisation have to have an articulation of what that culture looks like. You then need a series of reinforcing mechanisms, as I like to call them, things like performance management, or the way that we recruit people, or the way that we train and develop people that are aligned with those behaviours. And then the final thing is to measure that performance, so to understand how well the organisation is doing against those behaviours. How do you know when you've achieved that culture that you've been looking for? Well, at one level it's I hope quite simple, and that is that colleagues in your organisation will tell you. If you ask them and you have the right culture of openness and transparency, they will tell you how you're doing in terms of your culture. But there are other ways to measure it, looking at not only colleague engagement scores, but what other indicators of behaviour are there around the organisation. So things like whistleblowing or harassment claims, which you'd hope are less prevalent. So what are the sort of behavioural indicators around the company? What would you say are the changes that companies, particularly in financial services, are likely to face in the future in this area? I think the nature of customer relationships is changing, particularly in our sector. They are becoming more digital. They therefore see and speak directly to a member of our staff less regularly than they would have done in the past. So that opportunity for a face-to-face, person-to-person trusting relationship is less possible. And therefore we have to build trust with our customers through different mechanisms, and that's more challenging. Many organisations outside of our sector have done that from their inception, and we are in the process of transitioning our relationships to a multi-channel approach, and we need to build and maintain that trust through all those different channels. What advice would you have for companies or HR teams who are just beginning to think about this topic? My advice is actually very simple. It is to define that culture, ensure that that is owned and led by the very top of the organisation in a way that not only can be articulated simply to the organisation, but is reflective of the way that senior management and the leadership of the organisation actually behave. Well, thanks very much indeed for your time, Paul. If you want to find out more about this topic, you can refer to a City HR publication called Measuring Up: Advanced People Analytics for City Employers, and that publication can be found on our website. Goodbye.